Welcome to Celestial Zodiac. In today's video we're starting our deep dive into Chiron, one of the most misunderstood points in astrology. You may have heard Chiron referred to as the wounded healer. But what does that actually mean? Is it trauma? Is it pain? Is it something you're supposed to fix? In this video we're going to break down what Chiron really represents, both astrologically and psychologically, so you can understand how it shows up in your life and why it matters. Chiron is not a traditional planet. Astronomically, it's classified as a centaur, a small celestial body that orbits between Saturn and Uranus. Unlike the planets, its path is more elliptical, meaning it moves between both regions over time. Because of this, it acts as a kind of bridge between the visible, structured world of Saturn and the more unpredictable, transformative energy of Uranus. Unlike the Moon's nodes, which have a north and south point, Chiron is a single placement in your chart and represents a specific area of sensitivity and growth. In astrology, Chiron represents a very specific kind of experience, something deeper than personality traits or life events. Chiron was a centaur, but he was not like the other centaurs. In Greek mythology, most centaurs were wild, impulsive, and driven by instinct. But Chiron was different. He was wise, intelligent, and deeply compassionate. He became a teacher, healer, and mentor to heroes, guiding figures like Achilles, Asclepius, and Hercules. Chiron was known for his ability to heal others. He understood medicine, herbs, and the nature of suffering. But his story takes a tragic turn. One day, Chiron was accidentally struck by a poisoned arrow. The arrow had been dipped in the venom of the Hydra, making the wound incurable. Chiron was immortal, so he could not die, but he also could not heal. He was forced to live with a wound that would never fully go away. Eventually, the pain became unbearable. Chiron chose to give up his immortality in exchange for the freedom from suffering. In some versions of the myth, he trades his immortality to free Prometheus, who had been eternally punished by Zeus. Chiron dies, but through that act he brings relief not only to himself but to another. This is why Chiron is called the wounded healer, because in mythology, Chiron was a healer who could help others, but could not fully heal himself. That symbolism carries into astrology. Your Chiron placement points to an area of life where you may feel pain, sensitivity, or vulnerability, but also where you have the potential to develop deep understanding and compassion. This is one of the key differences between Chiron and the planets. Planets describe functions, how you think, feel, act, or relate. The nodes describe direction, where you're coming from and where you're going. But Chiron describes something more internal. It shows where something doesn't quite feel resolved, where something may not fully go away, and where growth doesn't come from fixing, but from learning how to live with it in a different way. Psychologically, Chiron represents what we can call a core wound. This is different from surface-level pain or temporary struggles. A core wound is something that touches your identity. It can feel deeply personal, sometimes irrational, and often difficult to explain to others. Chiron is commonly associated with themes like shame, rejection, or invisibility. You may feel like there's something about you that doesn't quite fit, or something that makes you different in a way that's hard to articulate. And that's another hallmark of Chiron. It can be difficult to put into words. It's not always something you can point to and say, "This is exactly what happened." Sometimes it's a pattern, or feeling. It can be a sensitivity that seems to repeat itself in different forms throughout your life. For example, someone with a strong Chiron theme might not be able to point to one specific event and say, "This is where it started." Instead, it might show up as a pattern. They might walk into a group setting, whether it's school, work, or even online, and feel like they don't quite fit in. Not necessarily rejected, not necessarily excluded, but just slightly out of place. Over time, they might notice that this feeling keeps repeating. They could be in different environments with different people and still feel that same sense of being unseen or not fully understood. And if you ask them why, they might not have a clear answer. It's not always tied to one moment. It's more like a quiet, underlying feeling that follows them, showing up in different ways throughout their life. And one of the most important things to understand about Chiron is this: healing does not mean the wound disappears. This isn't like a problem you solve and then move on from. Instead, healing often looks like developing awareness, self-acceptance, and the ability to respond differently over time. In many cases, the very thing that once felt like a weakness becomes a source of insight, empathy, and even strength. For example, someone might grow up feeling like when they speak, people don't really listen or take them seriously. Over time, they may start to second-guess themselves, hesitate before speaking, or feel like they have to explain things perfectly just to be understood. Early on, this might lead them to either stay quiet or over-explain, trying to make sure they're heard. But as they become more aware of the pattern, something shifts. They begin to notice that feeling when it comes up, the urge to hold back or overcompensate, and instead of reacting automatically, they pause. They start expressing themselves more directly, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. The sensitivity doesn't disappear, but their response changes. And over time, that same experience gives them a deeper understanding of communication. They may become someone who listens more carefully, speaks more intentionally, and helps others feel heard in a way they once didn't. Another example is when someone might feel like their value is tied to what they produce or achieve. They may constantly push themselves to do more, be better, or prove their worth, never quite feeling like it's enough. At first, this drives them to work harder, take on more, and seek validation through results. But over time, they start to recognize the pattern. They notice that no matter how much they accomplish, the feeling doesn't fully go away. That's when awareness begins. Instead of pushing harder every time that feeling comes up, they begin to question it. They start setting boundaries, slowing down, and redefining what worth actually means to them. The wound doesn't disappear, but they're no longer controlled by it. And in many cases, they develop a deeper sense of balance and even help others break out of that same cycle. It's important to make a clear distinction here. Chiron is not a diagnosis. Astrology is a symbolic language. It reflects patterns and themes, but it doesn't replace professional support, therapy, or medical care. What Chiron can do is provide insight. It can help you recognize patterns you may already be experiencing, and give you a framework for understanding why certain themes feel more sensitive or persistent. In that sense, Chiron can complement therapy and self-work. It can give language to something that feels hard to define, but awareness alone doesn't create instant healing. Understanding your Chiron placement doesn't mean the wound disappears overnight. Some experiences require time. Some require repetition, reflection, and compassion. And some require support from others. Chiron reminds us that healing is not always linear. It's not about becoming perfect or completely unaffected. It's about learning how to hold your experiences with more understanding and less self-judgment. For example, someone might recognize that they have a pattern of being overly self-critical. They may notice that when something goes wrong, even something small, their immediate reaction is to judge themselves harshly or assume they failed in some way. After learning about their Chiron placement, they begin to understand that this reaction isn't just about the moment. It's part of a deeper pattern. At first, that awareness doesn't change everything. They still have those thoughts. They still feel that internal pressure. But instead of immediately believing those thoughts, they start to pause and observe them. Over time, they begin to respond differently. They might catch themselves in the moment and say, "This is that pattern again," instead of automatically spiraling into self-judgment. They may start practicing more compassion toward themselves, giving themselves space to make mistakes without turning it into a reflection of their worth. And sometimes they seek support, whether that's talking to someone they trust or working through it in a more structured way. The process isn't perfect. There are still moments where the old pattern comes back. But the difference is, it no longer has the same level of control. Over time, they develop a deeper understanding of themselves. They become more patient, more self-aware, and less reactive. And in many cases, that same experience allows them to support others who struggle with similar patterns. The wound is still part of their experience, but it's no longer something that defines them in the same way. Chiron is not about something being wrong with you. It's about recognizing where something in your life may feel sensitive, unresolved, or deeply human, and learning how to work with that over time. In the next videos, we're going to break down Chiron by sign and by house so you can start to see how this shows up more specifically in your chart. Thank you for watching Celestial Zodiac. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you found this video about Chiron helpful.